and Lord of Lords. God has a regard for human life. It is precious in his sight. You have no right to take another human life. If you do, you forfeit your own. Our contemporary society feels differently about it and makes the criminal the hero and the honest man the villain. We live in a day when evil is called good and good is called evil. However, believers have a responsibility to human government. In fact, Paul said to a young preacher, I exhort, therefore, that first of all, supplications, prayers, intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceful life in all goodliness and honesty. For this is a good and acceptable in the sight of our of God, our Savior. First Timothy chapter 2, verse 1 through 3. By the way, we are to pray for those in authority, not leaving it to the preachers on Sunday morning. The duty of the believer as a citizen of heaven is spiritual. The duty of the believer as a citizen under the government is secular. These two are separate functions, and to combine them is to fail to keep church and state separate and distinct. The law in Paul's day was reluctant to bow before the proud Roman state. Jewry had uh, fomented disturbances in the city of Rome, and as a result, Claudius had banished them on one occasion. The proud Pharisees rejected the Roman authorities in Palestine and their desire to restore the government to the nation of Israel. It was they who masterminded the encounter with Jesus and raised the issue, is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? The implication smacked of revolution, as you can see. It is well to remember that the authorities in Paul's day were mad and murderous. Nero was on the throne of Rome, and there were uh, Pilate and Herod, all a bunch of rascals, yet he said that believers were to obey those in authority. And that concludes this section. Now let's move on to section verse 1. Relationship to government. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but God. The powers that be are ordained of God. We are to submit ourselves to government authorities for the very simple reason that they are ordained of God. It is true that the kingdoms of the world belong to Satan, and that injustice and corruption abound in all governments. Yet God still has control. History in the monotonous account of how a government flourished for a time in pomp and pride and that was brought to ruin and rubble. Why? Because corruption and lawlessness became rampant. As it did, God brought the government to an end. God still rules even over this earth. God has not abdicated his throne. He is riding triumphantly in his own chariot. Neither is he disturbed by what is happening on this earth. You will recall that when Uzziah, the king of Judah, died, Isaiah was disturbed and very much discouraged. Uzziah had been a good king, and Isaiah thought the government would designate, uh, disintegrate after he was gone. So Isaiah went into the temple, which is a good place to go at a time like that. He came into God's presence and he saw the Lord sitting upon the throne, high and lifted up. In other words, God had not abdicated. Uzziah was dead, but God was not dead. God was still on the throne. Now, the allegiance of the Christian is to that throne, and his relationship to his government on earth is submissive.